Today's episode of the Dude Catholic Podcast is brought to you by Scapulars.com. When you want to wear a scapular that feels more like the armor of God and less like an act of penance, go to Scapulars.com and enter code DUDE upon checkout. Welcome to the Dude Catholic Podcast. I'm your co-host Adrian here with our guest and main host of the day, Steve Caracas, who is a man who leads pilgrimages. And as a pilgrimage leader, was told by the Egyptians that there are no crocodiles in their country. I think they're in denial. Gets worse and worse every time. Why am I like this? Anyway, let's get going. Let's get this special edition of the Dude Catholic Podcast on the road. Now, we don't often have guests in the podcast, but someone reached out to me and they mentioned something that I'm rather fond of. You know, we're really here to talk about the scapular. But first of all, we got to know who you are. So let's get a quick little intro. Who is Steve?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for having me on, Adrian. This is awesome. So I started off seeking adventure in life. I became a pilot in college. I was looking to travel the world. I ended up at age 19 in Alaska in the summer times to work on the ships in the Bering Sea in order to make enough money to pay for flight school. And it was at that time that I thought to myself, you know, people die out here every year. So this is dangerous stuff. I need divine protection out here out at sea. And so that's when I started wearing the scapular. I actually had one as a child. I got it first communion, and of course it broke within a week because I was probably climbing a tree or something. But you know, I got another one and I kept it with me. But I wore that. I put it on when I went on the ship. And then I've been wearing it ever since, and of course new ones as they break, but that was the beginning of me wearing the scapular. I went on to become a high school teacher for 7 years. Things were tough with the world at the time. The airlines were going out of business and there was no work, so I thought I'll just become a high school teacher and share this adventure of life, an adventure of Catholicism with my students. And I started taking them to the World Youth Day events around the world just to show them, to open their eyes to the universality of the church, to see that this is more than their parish, more than their family, more than their community. It's the whole world. And so this was a really eye-opening experience. And other schools and parishes started asking me, hey, can you take our kids? It's such a great experience for your kids, your students. And they have such transformational experiences. We want that for our students, our kids. So that's how the pilgrimages got started. And out of that experience of teaching for 7 years, I launched JMJ Youth Pilgrimages, which is now, you know, we take, for example, to the next World Youth Day in Lisbon, we'll probably take 2,000 or 3,000 people from all over the world. And we organize that not as one group, but as many smaller groups. And with the leadership that we've trained ourselves through an immersion training program to guide them through the experience of World Youth Day so that they can, you know, basically teach them how to open their hearts to the grace of God so that it can be transformational for them rather than just getting lost in the bigness of World Youth Day. So that's kind of the pilgrimage side. Over all those years of traveling, you know, and now I met my wife at a World Youth Day in Denver right after college. Nice. And we got married 8 months later, and we have 9 children. And so it's been a life of abundance ever since we met. Not necessarily an abundance of money, but an abundance of love and of life. Absolutely. So where was I going? Oh yeah. So we've had many scapulars over the years. Our kids have worn them. I've worn them, my wife. And of course they break all the time. And I've been complaining for 20 years about poor quality scapulars, I kept asking people, hey, can you make a good one, please? I mean, something that won't break and something that, isn't uncomfortable or something that doesn't ride up, just make a good one. And everyone said, oh yeah, that's a good idea, but they never did it. So after all those years of complaining, I thought, I'm going to do it myself. And so I started from scratch, and I thought, how can we solve all these problems with the brown scapular? And so we found ways to deal with all the questions, and maybe we can get into that as we move forward. But that's kind of a little bit about me and my background.
Awesome. Question: why stop at 9 kids?
Well, that's you have to ask God.
This is the guy with 3 who can barely handle it.
Well, I tell people, when people ask, they say 9 kids. I say, yeah, we have 9 children, but we're not crazy like those people with 10. Those people are nuts.
I know, right? Man, there's this comedian who said something about having 5 kids. And then he said, well, people ask, what is it like having 5 kids? And I said, well, imagine drowning. And then someone throws you a baby.
Yeah.
I'm like, 9. After the 8th one,
I figure after the 3rd one.
8. And the thing is, like, it's an audio podcast, but Steve has all his hair. He actually is more California than the Dude Catholic podcast. That he's got like the surfer hair, like all of it too. I'm a little jealous. I've been losing my hair recently. It's thinning out. I was wearing a beanie at the beginning of this Zoom because I wanted to, hide that. But it is what it is. It's gonna happen. It's in my genes, I suppose.
I have some hair, but you can see it's turning gray here. So a lot of wisdom in there. See that?
Wisdom? There you go. Yeah, it only adds to the charm. That's it. No, and that's very cool. I mean, we can go in many directions. We were actually talking about this earlier when I mentioned that I carry a scapular in my pocket because my rosary got kind of, I don't know, it's kind of bulky because I keep everything in my pockets, and so the scapular actually is really nice. It's really nice to carry because when I put it on, it rides up on me, and it's kind of annoying at times. Like it goes on one side, like both ends of the scapular end up like on my left shoulder, and it's just annoying. And sometimes like having a tag, like I'm so grateful that they stopped putting tags on shirts. They just print them. I only buy those because the tag annoys me. I have ADD as it is, and so whenever something else is distracting me, I can only think of that thing which is distracting me. And so whether it's that tag or a scapular scratching my back or something, like I won't function well as a person trying to pretend that they're an adult, I don't do well. So there's even some dirty shirts. You know what? This is ridiculous that I'm even bringing this up. But instead of, they print the tag, but then it has a tag on the side anyway. I think I'm touching it right now. and I feel it, and then it just there it is. I'm like, what's the point? Like, why are you pretending that you're helping me when you're not? And so that is a good transition to ask, so what's the deal with these scapulars? What makes them different?
Sure. So a couple of the problems. One of the big problems is that they break all the time. Second problem is that they're uncomfortable, that the wool is kind of scratchy.
Yeah.
Third one is that they kind of ride up. And so in order to deal with all those things, I did several designs. I sketched out several ways in order to make the design in such a way that it wouldn't, the stitching wouldn't come off, first of all.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a special way in which we take the wool. Now, the other problem was with the wool. Typically it's uncomfortable. People complain. They're like, well, it's kind of irritating and scratchy. And then other people say, well, it's a sacrifice and you ought to just suck it up and offer it up to God, small sacrifice.
I know a couple of people that would say that.
They're pretending that it's a hair shirt because hair shirts are uncomfortable and they're supposed to be a penance, but scapulars are not hair shirts. And we can get into that in just a little bit.
I want to.
What I did was I took the finest wool in the world, which is merino wool from the merino sheep. These are from Australia. And so it's a very soft, very comfortable wool. It's 100% wool. It totally fulfills the requirement of a wool brown scapular, but it's comfortable. It's like t-shirt material. And so that takes care of the itchy problem. And so then we opened the whole thing up a bit. We made the wool twice as wide, and we put we took some really strong American-made paracord, and put the cords all the way inside, fold the wool over, and then stitch like crazy all the way around it, so that it doesn't matter. These things are not going to break. I'm still wearing the prototype from years ago, and it's in great shape.
Nice.
So that's the issue with the feeling of the wool, and also of the stitching and the cord breaking and stuff like that. So the third thing is that a lot of people like to wear a medal on the scapular so it doesn't get tangled with other things on their neck.
I didn't
And
know that
it
secret.
rides up, right? So what I did was I took both ends of it and figured out a way to create a pocket on each end of the scapular. So you can stick in a medal on this, let's say, both ends, but if you stick it on this end, it actually weights it down and holds it in place so that it's down here in front, versus riding up and going all over the place. And it also then takes away the metal on the cord, which actually wears through the cord. So you just stick them right inside.
Look at that. That's ingenious right there. See, I was looking at this scapular right here that was in my pocket, and I noticed it had a bunch of knots. And when you mentioned that thing about the paracord, I'm like, look at that. That solves that other issue, with carrying it in your pocket. I mean, that's the one that I wouldn't want to carry in my pocket now that I know all this, So the Dude Catholic podcast, the listeners that I've been listening for a while know that it started with myself and my brother before he became a sheriff deputy in the undisclosed department of Los Angeles. He's not MIA, but he only comes every once in a while now to the podcast. And I've been thinking about getting him something, but if I get him the paracord rosary that I have, it's too bulky. But if I get him a scapular, that may work. And I can put a St. Michael medal in there, and it won't be much of a problem. I don't know if they'll let him wear it, but if it's under the uniform, I'm pretty sure it's not going to be a problem.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, should be fine. I know a lot of police officers and firemen and others who wear them, military.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it is that a lot of people don't know that basically, if you're Jewish, if you're a Muslim, if you're Christian, you can all have a devotion to Saint Michael, and if you're in law enforcement, firefighting, or whatever, like there's all sorts of faiths that actually believe in the same stuff that we believe, not entirely, but at least there's this much, like the children of Abraham can agree on, we worship the God of Abraham. We have this dude named Saint Michael, and he's just kind of a badass, and he protects us, when we're doing the dangerous stuff of life. Right. And that's another thing, I want to get into the into what the knowledge that you have about the scapular. Like, where does it come from? Like, why the scapular? Sure. Like, why the scapular? Why not the rosary? Why not any other devotion, a prayer card, or anything? Like, you mentioned that specifically in your story. I was paying attention. I know I mentioned that I get distracted easily, but I was paying attention to that. And I don't know if you can dive in a little bit more into that. Like, why did you choose that and not the rosary or any other devotion?
Sure. Oh, yeah. And I would never say that I chose this and not the rosary, because the rosary and the scapular, they go hand in hand. They are inseparable. This rosary is our weapon, and the scapular is our shield. Right? It's a divine protection. So you don't go to battle without both of them, right? These and I'll talk about that as well in Fatima, how Our Lady talked about both devotions. But so the scapular itself comes from a time in the Middle Ages, at the same time frame that the rosary comes from, through Saint Dominic. The scapular came through Saint Simon Stock. He was in charge. He was the father general of the Carmelite order, and they had to move their order out of the Holy Land because of the problems with the post-Crusade or mid-Crusade issues with the Muslims over there. And so they moved to England.
We lost, in case you didn't know, guys.
Yeah, we held the territory for a century, then we lost it.
There we go. We did our best.
Yeah. So they were on Mount Carmel, but they had to leave. And so they moved to England, and they were given a chunk of land from one of the nobles there. And there were a lot of people in Europe thinking, we don't need another order. There's a lot of new orders and a lot of great orders. We don't need these Carmelites. And they look like Bedouins. They have this striped uniform. And so he was praying for divine protection. And he told the Blessed Mother, we complete loyalty. We will dedicate ourselves to you and give you complete loyalty in exchange for your protection. We're asking for a special privilege, a special protection. And he wrote the Flos Carmeli prayer, which is something that is prayed every day by the Carmelites, even to this day. And it's a beautiful prayer to Our Lady. And Our Lady, in response, appeared to him and gave him the brown scapular, saying, take this as the scapular of your order. And it'll be a sign of protection. And whoever dies wearing the scapular shall not suffer eternal fire. And so it was this huge promise of protection in life and in death. And he took this as the scapular of the order. And this is something that they still wear today. But if you notice the religious orders, they wear a scapular. It goes over the shoulders and goes all the way down the front, all the way down the back.
Yeah.
And it rests on the scapular bone, which is why it's called a scapular. And they still wear the religious scapular. Communities would build around the monasteries and around the orders in those days. And the local community would take on some of the spirituality of that particular order. And sometimes they would take on part of the habit to show their affiliation with that charism or that spirituality. And so what they did was, some of the scapulars, they would cut off little pieces of the larger scapulars and turn them into little tiny rectangular pieces, attach them with cords, and then the lay people would wear those as a part of that habit. So it's a miniature of the Carmelite habit is what it is.
Nice.
And in order to receive the graces of the scapular, you must be enrolled in the scapular as if you're receiving the habit. And it's a small prayer, short prayer. You can find it online. And a priest or a deacon can enroll any of the faithful after First Holy Communion in the scapular. And after that point, you never have to be enrolled again. You just have to get another scapular and put it on. So the Holy Fathers over time extended that privilege of wearing that to the laity, not just to the Third Order Carmelites, but to all the faithful, everyone. And it became a very popular devotion. And then over time, so the question is, okay, how does this work, right? Does it, and I tell people, it's not a get out of hell free card. The scapular,
oh man,
will not save you, right? Only Jesus will save you. Only God will save you. So, but the question is, well, then what is the grace? How does it work? And this comes from a very classical understanding of the Old Testament suzerain vassal treaties, where there is a strong party and a weak party. And in this case, the strong party is God and the weak party is us. And in the Old Testament, it's God comes and says and gives his credentials. I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of Egypt. I saved you. And then he gives them a task. He says, be faithful to me and I will raise you up. I will save you. And as long as we're faithful to our part of the deal, God is always faithful to his part of the deal. And so when it comes to the scapular, Saint Simon promised Our Lady complete loyalty, which would have us remain close to her Son and the sacraments, that we would remain in a state of grace. And in response, she would give us divine protection by wearing the scapular in life and in death. And so then the question comes, well, does the burden fall all back on our shoulders? It's not, really doing much for us, but that's not.
I was going to say, so what's the use of wearing the scapular?
So here's the kicker, is that by wearing the scapular, God gives us actual grace. And actual grace is a way for us to remain in the grace of God, in sanctifying grace. And that's the same thing with wearing a cross around your neck or putting those holy images in your house. It's these bring actual grace. They help us. So not only does God hold up his end of the bargain, he helps us hold up our end of the bargain. We wear that scapular. He gives us actual grace, and he's helping us do our part. So there's two parts to it, and God is doing part of both of them.
Nice. When you were saying that, I thought about all the different things I have in my class. I used to have it in my classroom when I was a Catholic school teacher. But all the stuff that I have in my house, I can't really be yelling at my kids while I'm looking at a crucifix, So that actually gives me grace without me even trying, because it's right there. I can't really behave in certain ways. I can't think in certain ways, even if I feel the scapular on me. Maybe that was one of the original reasons why I was supposed to have wool, so you're kind of itchy. You're like, oh, when I get the itch to do something, there's something else itching that reminds me not to scratch that other itch, and Enough dad puns already. I wanted to ask. It's a dumb question that occurred to me while you were saying all this stuff because I know that the scapular was an actual gift. Do we still have that scapular anywhere from Our Lady?
Oh, so what to the one given to Saint Simon Stock?
Yes.
That is a good question.
Ah, good question indeed. In fact, it's such a good question that we're going to save it for the next installment of the Dude Catholic podcast. So join us next time as we continue to speak to Mr. Steve Carricus of Scapulars.com. And in the meantime, don't forget to go to Scapulars.com and enter code DUDE upon checkout so you can get a nice little discount on the best scapular you're ever going to wear. Alright, that's pretty much it. See you next time. Cue the music. Who's in charge of the music? Oh, it's me.